Hello, this is Yogeshwar 7000 again, and I'm back with another very important topic today. And today's topic is about Tithi Pravesh. And we're going to discuss a little in detail as to what is Tithi, what does Tithi Pravesh mean, and what does a Tithi Pravesh chart means. So based on the Tithi Pravesh, a chart is drawn and predictions are made. So this is what we're going to discuss. Tithi is actually a concept as per the Hindu calendar, which describes you the distance between the sun and the moon. So a tithi is determined, rather not described. A tithi is determined based on the distance between the sun and the moon. Some people call it angle, the angle between a sun and moon, but I will just make it very simple for you and say, well, that's the distance between the sun and the moon. So to understand this, we have to understand what tithi is. So as we know that there's a full moon day and there is a complete dark moon day. And the full moon day is when the moon is farthest from the sun, meaning it is at exactly 180 degrees. It cannot go beyond 180 degrees because in the zodiac sign of 360 degrees, it can go as far as 180 degrees. And then again, when it returns back towards the sun, or when sun and moon are getting closer, the point where sun meets the moon, moon is completely dark. That is the Amavasya day, or the complete dark moon day. So we have to understand this basic principle first, that the full moon is when the moon is farthest from a sun, which is 180 degrees, and a dark moon is when sun and moon are kind of conjunct, when moon loses all its power and its complete darkness, and that's the Amavas day. Now, when the sun and the moon go towards that 180 degrees maximum distance, that is the Shukla Paksha, which is the waxing of the moon, where moon slowly waxes and waxes and waxes and waxes and waxes until it reaches farthest from the sun, which is a distance of 180 degrees. And that time takes 15 days. So the waxing of the moon occurs during 15 days. It is also called a Paksha, which is called in Sanskrit as Shukla Paksha. And when the moon and sun are coming closer, the moon wanes. And that is the waning cycle of the moon. That cycle also is of 15 days. And until it reaches where sun and moon are together and there's complete darkness, Amavas. So these 15 days of the waxing moon and 15 days of the waning moon are called the Tithis as per the Hindu calendar. We don't call it days, and this happens in 30 days because sun moves in the entire zodiac of 360 degrees in about 12 months, and this waxing and waning of the moon occurs every 15 days. So first there is a Shukla Paksha, or the waxing phase of the moon, then there is a Krishna Paksha, or the waning phase of the moon. Waxing phase occurs for 15 days until the point where it's full moon. Waning phase is another 15 days until the time there is complete darkness or Amavas. and the waxing is divided into 15 tithis, and these tithis are determined based on the distance of the moon and the sun. So the first tithi is when the sun, so you divide 180 degrees by 15, so it is 12 degrees. So the first tithi is when it's in the Shukla Paksha or the waxing phase of the moon. The first tithi is when there's a distance of 12 degrees between the sun and the moon. The second tithi is when there's a distance of 24 degrees between the sun and the moon. So slowly this degrees increases until there's a distance of 180 degrees, and then again in the waning phase, slowly these degrees decrease from 180 degrees to when it becomes conjunct with sun, and these 15 tithis are basically a distance of 12 degrees each, because 180 degrees divided by 15 is 12 degrees. So some people call it the 12-degree angle between sun and moon, and some people, I'll make it simple, like I said, just consider that a distance between sun and moon is 12 degrees, which is determined by one tithi. And of course, as we know that the sun also is in movement in relationship to the earth, and the moon is also in movement in relationship to the earth. So every tithi is determined based on the distance of 12 degrees between the sun and the moon. So I hope I've made myself clear that there are 30 tithis in the waxing and waning cycle of the moon. So we understood what tithi is. Now, why are we discussing Tithi Pravesh? Tithi Pravesh is very important because, first of all, based on Tithi Pravesh, we can draw a chart which is called a Tithi Pravesha chart. And this Tithi Pravesha chart is going to tell us our Varshaphala, or how the year is going to be. Okay, but here we have missed out very important component, which is the sun. So how do we create a Tithi Pravesh chart is first we take into consideration the solar return, meaning which the zodiac sign in which your sun was at the time of birth has to be taken into consideration. So take your natal chart, see where your sun was placed at the time of birth, and as we know that sun comes every year, or sun goes around 360 degrees in the 12 zodiac signs in 1 year. So based on this we create the Varshaphala. So first take into consideration where, like I said, I'm repeating myself, take into consideration where the sun was placed at the time of your birth. Okay, which zodiac sign, and then find out this year for which you're calculating the Varshaphala or the annual horoscope. Varshaphala means annual horoscope as to when your sun is going to be returning to the same zodiac sign, which is also called solar return, as it's very popularly called in the West. And then try to figure out as to what was the distance traveled in that zodiac sign at the time of birth, when sun traveled to that zodiac sign when you were born, which you can find out from the natal chart, and calculate the exact distance when this year, or in the annual horoscope, the sun will be traveling to the same zodiac sign where you were born in. Say for example, you were born in at the time when sun was in Aries at 10 degrees. So the annual horoscope or the Varshaphala is going to be calculated for that particular year. Say for example we are in 2016, so you'll consider where your sun was placed in the natal horoscope, and then where sun is going to be placed this year, which is 2016, in the same zodiac sign of Aries. We are considering Aries, somebody who's born in Aries. And then say for example sun was in Aries at 10 degrees at the time of your birth. Consider the exact date and time when sun is going to be in 10 degrees Aries. So based on that, you draw your annual horoscope or your Varshaphala chart. And the Tajik system, which is actually Tajik comes from the western side of India, which could come from somewhere in the Middle East as well. They follow this annual horoscope where they only take into consideration the sun, or the Varshaphala, where they only take into consideration the solar return, or when sun returns to the same zodiac sign at the same distance as compared to when you were born. So they stop right there. But here we are talking about Tithi Pravesha. I've already explained to you what Tithi is. So you not only take into consideration the sun's movement into the same zodiac sign at the same distance as compared to your natal chart, you will also take into consideration the moon's movement into the same zodiac sign at the same distance as compared to your natal chart. So that's the slight difference here. In India, we take into consideration both the sun return and also the moon's return, and based on that we calculate the Varshaphala, which is called the Tithi Pravesha chart, or actually a finer form of the Varshaphala as compared to what is practiced in the West, where they calculate just the sun. So that is the Tithi Pravesha concept and the Tithi Pravesha chart which we create for annual horoscopy or the Varshaphala. So I hope and I've made myself very clear that you will see the Tithi of the sun at the time of your birth and calculate the movement of sun. Sun, of course, you've taken into consideration, but for moon you will take into consideration the same Tithi where the Tithi was at the time of your birth, and then you will put it exactly the same in today's current year's chart, and you will calculate the exact distance of which is covered by moon in that Tithi. Say for example, moon moved into a Tithi at the time of your birth, and it moved 50% of that Tithi, meaning that it probably moved, not probably, it moved, if it's 50%, it would have moved 6 degrees out of the 12 degrees of that Tithi. So when you calculate the annual horoscope based on the Tithi Pravesha chart, where you're taking into consideration the sun return and the moon return as well, you will calculate the Tithi of the moon and calculate the exact time, like we have compared it with the natal chart. Say for example, it has moved in the natal chart 6 degrees or 50%. You will also take into consideration the same Tithi. Say for example, it's the 7th Tithi of the waxing moon at the time of your birth. You will take the same Tithi, 7th Tithi of the waxing moon, and also take into consideration how much moon has progressed in that Tithi. In this case it was 6 degrees, meaning 50%, and that is the exact time of the Tithi Pravesha. Pravesha means entrance, and based on that you calculate your Varshaphala or the Tithi Pravesha chart. So Varshaphala is only taking into consideration the movement of sun return and the same distance it covered in that zodiac sign, but Tithi Pravesha chart takes into consideration both the sun and the moon. The sun and how much it has progressed in that zodiac sign, and the moon, what exact tithi it was when you were born, and then what exact tithi it is in this year, and how much had it progressed in that particular tithi at the time of your birth. And the same progress has to be calculated for the annual horoscope or the Tithi Pravesha chart. So both sun and moon are taken into consideration, and that Tithi Pravesha, and that exact point in time when moon moves or enters a Pravesha into that exact point compared to your natal chart and that is the basis of your Tithi Pravesha chart. So I've tried to explain you what is a Tithi Pravesha and how it is calculated and what is the purpose. Now the $1 million question here is, how do we interpret the Tithi Pravesha chart? Meaning, how will you interpret as to how this year is going to be for you? Because it's about annual horoscopy, it's about Varshaphala. So there are a few determinants, there are many determinants, but out of the many determinants or criteria to figure out how the year is going to be. And by the way, this is just one tool. Don't determine or conclude your annual horoscopy based on just this tool, because you're running a Vimshotri Dasha, you may be running a Gemini Chara Dasha, and all those things also have to be taken into consideration. So we're not taking into consideration. We'll just take this particular tool of Tithi Pravesha chart, which is an annual horoscopy or a Varshaphala chart based on Tithi. Varshaphala, again, Varshaphala as per Tajak and the Western astrology takes only into consideration sun, but we're taking into consideration sun and the moon. So how do we determine what is the criteria? First, out of this various criteria and determinations, one of the important criteria is you will be able to figure out what is the weekday when the Tithi Pravesha happens, meaning when that sun is in the same zodiac sign at the same distance, and then or the same, basically the sun would be in the same zodiac sign, not the same distance, because if you calculate sun's distance in the exact same point, then you cannot compare it with the moon as well, because sun will be moving and then moon will be moving, and you cannot come to a meeting point there. So just take into consideration the sun's entrance into that zodiac sign where you were at the time of birth, and then the Tithi Pravesha based on what Tithi you were at the time of your birth and how much it had progress at the time of your birth, and do the same calculation for this year. So you will be able to determine at that point what is the weekday for this particular year for which you are trying to calculate the annual horoscopy or annual horoscope or the Varshaphala. And then look at the lord of that weekday, meaning if it falls on a Sunday, then the lord of the weekday is Surya. If it falls on a Monday, the lord is the moon, so on and so forth. And then you compare it with your natal horoscope or your basic Rashi chart, as it is called. And you'll be able to figure out as to if that particular planet is lucky for you as per your natal birth chart. Then you will be able to determine that how this year is going to be. Say for example, if it falls on a Monday and the lord is moon, look at your natal chart. If moon is lucky for you, of course this year is going to be lucky because the Tithi Pravesha happens on a day whose lord is moon, which is lucky for you. Okay, now point number 2, please remember that the second day falls on the sunrise of the second day. So for example, it's after midnight on a Monday, it still is ruled by Monday until it is the following day's sunrise. So the date does not change until the following day. So that is extremely important. Please remember that. And the second point here is that a Tithi Pravesh chart's Lagna also is a very important determinant. And it's very simple. Once a Tithi Pravesha chart is created, look at the Lord of the Lagna and compare it with your natal chart. Say for example, the Lagna of the Tithi Pravesha chart is Aquarius, so the Lord is Saturn. So see in your natal chart, is Saturn lucky for you or not? If it is lucky, of course this year is going to be lucky for you. That's how it is considered. The third important point is the Hora Lord at the start of the Tithi. So what is the Hora Lord? The Hora, as we know that there are 24 Horas in a day, so at that point when moon enters the Tithi at the same point as compared to when you were born, or the same Tithi as compared to the same Tithi which you were in at the time of your birth, and the same progress it has made in that Tithi, that's the point of the Tithi Pravesha or the Tithi entrance. There it is governed by a Hora out of the 24 Horas. And then what is the Hora Lord? So if that Hora Lord, say for example, is any planet, could be Saturn, say for example is Saturn, look at how Saturn is placed in your natal chart. If Saturn is lucky for you, this year is going to be lucky for you. If it's not lucky for you, this year you may have to face challenges. So we have discussed, look at the weekday Lord, look at the Hora Lord, and look at the Lagna Lord, and compare it with your natal chart as to how those planets are placed in your birth chart. So these are a few determinants. There are other determinants, and there are quite a few which cannot be discussed within the purview of this video. But I thought this was an interesting topic, and so you came to know, for people who are not familiar with what a Varshaphala is, and what is a solar return, and what's annual horoscopy, and what is a Tithi Pravesha chart, you'll be surprised. Just don't celebrate your birthday based on, say for example, if you were born on 10th of July, just don't consider 10th of July every year as your birthday. No, look at the solar return to the same zodiac sign and look at the exact Tithi as compared to your natal chart, and find out what Tithi falls this year, and then look at how much moon has progressed in that Tithi, or how much is the angle of moon and sun, or the distance of moon and sun, and then put it in this year's chart, Tithi Pravesha chart, create a chart, and then I've told you how to analyze it as well. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. In the meanwhile, I will recommend subscribe to my channel and check out my website. There is a link below, and I will see you with an interesting topic very soon. Goodbye.